The moment of transformation. The blood of the Nazarene was still wet on my spear. The skies above Jerusalem had darkened to the color of bruised flesh, and the earth trembled beneath my feet as if the very foundations of the world had been shaken. I, Longinus, centurion of Rome's mighty empire, commander of 100 men, executioner of countless souls, found myself on my knees for the first time in decades. My hand still gripped the shaft of my spear, the same spear I had thrust into his side moments earlier to confirm what I already knew. The condemned man was dead. But when the blade pierced his flesh, something impossible happened. Water and blood flowed forth, not in the sluggish manner of a corpse, but with the vitality of a living spring. A single drop, a mixture of blood and water, splashed across my face, touching my eyes that had been slowly failing me for years. The world, which had been growing increasingly dim with each passing season, suddenly burst into brilliant clarity. The pain that had become my constant companion vanished in an instant. But it wasn't just my physical sight that was restored. Something deeper, something I had never known was blind within me, suddenly could see. I stared up at the broken body on the cross, at the face that even in death held no hatred, no bitterness, only peace. This was not the face of a criminal or a madman. This was not the face of a failed prophet or a deluded king. Words escaped my lips before I could contain them, words that would forever mark the boundary between the man I had been and the man I would become. Truly, this man was the Son of God. The other soldiers looked at me with confusion and fear. Some backed away as if I had been possessed. Perhaps I had been possessed by truth after a lifetime of lies. How had I come to this moment? The centurion before Christ. I had served Rome for 23 years. My body bore the scars of campaigns across 3 continents, from the misty forests of Germania to the scorching deserts of Judea. I was Longinus, first centurion of the Jerusalem garrison, respected and feared in equal measure. My men obeyed without question, for they had seen what happened to those who hesitated. I wasn't always this hard. As a young recruit from Lanciano, I had dreamed of glory and honor. But Rome doesn't conquer half the world with honor alone. The empire taught me that mercy is weakness, compassion is vulnerability, and doubt is death. I learned these lessons well, applying them with the efficiency Rome demanded. In the northern campaigns, I gained a reputation for ruthlessness. When a village refused to pay tribute, I made examples of their leaders. When rebels ambushed my men, I crucified survivors along the road for 20 miles. The province became peaceful, through fear, not love. This was the Roman way. This was my way. But while my reputation grew, my sight began to fail. It started with blurred vision at dusk, then progressed to constant pain behind my eyes. The physicians spoke of humors and imbalances, prescribing useless remedies. I kept this weakness hidden. A blind centurion would quickly be replaced, his glory forgotten. Some nights, I would wake in darkness, not from the failing of my eyes, but from dreams that left me shaking. In these visions, I stood alone on a barren hill beneath storm-black skies, while a voice I couldn't identify spoke words I couldn't understand. A sword of light pierced my chest, yet instead of pain, I felt a release, as if chains I had worn my entire life suddenly fell away. These dreams troubled me more than battlefield nightmares ever had. I told no one, not even Marcus, my most trusted officer since our days in the 10th Legion. He would have suggested offerings to Mars or Jupiter, but I sensed these dreams came from somewhere beyond our gods. Then came the assignment that would change everything. Pontius Pilate, the governor, summoned me personally. "Longinus," he said, his voice tense, "there's growing unrest regarding a Galilean preacher. His followers claim he performs miracles. Some call him the Messiah. I had heard such claims before. Jewish zealots were common, their messiahs plentiful, their rebellions predictable. "What would you have me do, Governor?" I asked, standing rigid despite the pain behind my eyes. "Observe him," Pilate replied. "Assess the threat. Jerusalem is filled with pilgrims for Passover. We cannot afford disturbances." As I left the governor's palace, I had no inkling that this routine assignment would lead me to the hill from my dreams, where everything I believed would be challenged by a man called Jesus of Nazareth. The arrest and trial. Jerusalem was restless that night. I had positioned my men throughout the city, expecting the usual Passover disturbances: drunken brawls, religious zealots proclaiming revolution, petty thievery in the crowded streets. But the commotion that reached my ears near midnight was different. A contingent of temple guards, accompanied by several of my own men, marched through the narrow streets leading a single prisoner. I stepped forward, expecting to see a dangerous revolutionary, perhaps armed and defiant. Instead, I saw a man of unremarkable appearance, his hands bound, but his posture straight. No fear contorted his features, no rage burned in his eyes. Most prisoners fought or pleaded. This man did neither. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Jesus of Nazareth," one of my soldiers replied. "Arrested at Gethsemane. The Jewish council wants him." So this was the Galilean preacher Pilate had mentioned. I studied him, searching for signs of the charisma that had apparently drawn thousands to hear him speak. His calm gaze met mine without flinching, without the usual hatred Romans received from Jewish prisoners. Something in that gaze disturbed me. Not defiance, but a recognition that seemed to pierce through my armor. They took him first to Annas, then to the high priest Caiaphas, where the Sanhedrin had hastily assembled despite the late hour. I stationed myself near the entrance, close enough to observe but not interfere in what was technically a religious matter. Inside, the questioning quickly became hostile. "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Caiaphas demanded. The prisoner's response sent murmurs through the chamber. "I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, and coming on the clouds of heaven." Caiaphas tore his robes in what seemed like genuine horror. "Blasphemy! What need do we have of witnesses? You have heard it yourselves." I had witnessed many trials, but never one where the accused seemed so unconcerned with defending himself. It was as if he welcomed their condemnation. By dawn, they brought him to Pilate's palace. The governor looked irritated at being disturbed so early, especially during the festival. I stood at attention behind him as the Jewish leaders presented their prisoner, carefully avoiding entering the palace lest they become ritually unclean. "What accusation do you bring against this man?" Pilate asked wearily. "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you," they replied evasively. Pilate questioned Jesus directly. "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" I nearly flinched at his boldness. Prisoners did not question the governor of Judea, yet Pilate seemed more intrigued than offended. Their exchange continued until a messenger interrupted, bringing a note from Pilate's wife. The governor's face grew troubled as he read it. What followed was a remarkable display of political maneuvering. Pilate, clearly reluctant to execute this man, offered the crowd a choice between Jesus and Barabbas, a notorious murderer. To my amazement, the crowd, likely orchestrated by the priests, chose to free the murderer. "What shall I do with Jesus called the Christ?" Pilate asked. "Crucify him!" they shouted. Pilate washed his hands before the crowd, declaring, "I am innocent of this man's blood," then ordered the prisoner flogged and crucified. As I led my men to carry out the sentence, I wondered why this case troubled me so. I had executed hundreds before. Why should this Galilean be different? The journey to Golgotha. The flogging came first. I had overseen hundreds of such punishments, but this one was different. As my soldiers stripped Jesus and bound him to the flogging post in the praetorium courtyard, I positioned myself where I always did, arms crossed, face impassive, a silent reminder of Rome's authority. The first lash tore across his back. I had seen hardened criminals scream, curse, or at least flinch. Jesus did none of these things. Each stroke of the flagrum laid open his flesh, the metal pieces embedded in the leather tearing away skin and muscle. Blood spattered the stones. Still he remained silent, accepting each blow as if he had been expecting it his entire life. "Hit harder!" one of my men shouted, perhaps unnerved by the prisoner's composure. I found myself wanting to call a halt before the customary 39 lashes were complete. This thought disturbed me. I had never before felt mercy toward a condemned man. Was it weakness creeping into my heart, or something else? When the flogging ended, Jesus stood hunched in pain but somehow unbroken. My men, perhaps unsettled by his dignity, began to mock him. They threw a purple robe over his bleeding shoulders, twisted thorns into a crude crown, and pressed it onto his head. Blood trickled down his face as they knelt before him in mockery. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they laughed, striking him with a reed staff. I watched, saying nothing, though something inside me recoiled at their cruelty. This wasn't the disciplined conduct of Roman soldiers. This was the behavior of men who sensed something they couldn't understand and sought to destroy it. When they tired of their game, we began the journey to Golgotha. The crossbeam was placed on Jesus' shoulders, rough wood against open wounds. The procession formed. Soldiers at the front clearing the way, myself leading, Jesus behind me, and more soldiers following. The streets were crowded with Passover pilgrims. Many turned away at the sight of yet another criminal headed for execution. Others jeered. A few women wept. Jesus stumbled under the weight of the beam, his strength depleted by the flogging and lack of sleep. He fell hard onto the stone pavement, and the crossbeam crashed down beside him. "Get up!" a soldier shouted, kicking him. With visible effort, Jesus pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. Blood from his crown of thorns had nearly blinded him. Even so, his eyes found mine as he stood. There was no hatred there, no plea for mercy, only a penetrating gaze that seemed to look beyond my armor to something I kept hidden even from myself. He fell a second time a few hundred paces later. This time I knew he wouldn't make it to Golgotha carrying the beam. Executions needed to happen quickly, especially during festivals. I spotted a strong-looking man in the crowd, clearly a visitor to Jerusalem. "You there!" I called out. "Carry this cross!" The man, who I later learned was Simon from Cyrene, looked terrified. Who wouldn't be? Being associated with an execution could bring unwanted attention. But he had no choice but to obey a centurion's command. As Simon took the crossbeam, Jesus managed to stand again. His eyes met Simon's, and something passed between them. Gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper. I had never seen a condemned man show concern for another's burden. We continued toward Golgotha. A group of women followed, weeping loudly. To my astonishment, Jesus turned to them and spoke, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." His words were not self-pitying but prophetic. Even in his suffering he thought of others. I had seen men face death with courage before, but never with such selflessness. As we climbed the rocky path to Golgotha, the place of the skull, I felt the strange dream from my sleep returning to my waking mind. This hill, these darkening skies, I had seen them before. My hand tightened on my spear as a sense of inevitability settled over me. Whatever was about to happen on this hill would change everything. The crucifixion and death. Golgotha lived up to its name. A barren hill shaped vaguely like a skull where Rome displayed its justice for all Jerusalem to see. 3 crosses stood prepared, 2 for the thieves sentenced alongside Jesus, 1 for him. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as we arrived. My men worked with practiced efficiency. This was routine for them. Position the condemned, stretch out their arms, drive iron nails through wrists and feet. I had overseen countless crucifixions, yet found myself unable to watch as they laid Jesus on the rough wood. The first hammer blow rang out. No scream followed, only a sharp intake of breath. I forced myself to look. Jesus' face was contorted in agony, but his eyes remained open, fixed on the sky above. The second nail drove through his other wrist. Still, no curse escaped his lips. When they raised the cross, dropping it roughly into the prepared hole, his entire body shuddered with the impact. Blood streamed from his wounds, head, back, hands, feet. The inscription Pilate had ordered placed above him read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," in 3 languages. The Jewish priests had objected, but Pilate, in a rare show of backbone, had refused to change it. The thieves crucified beside Jesus screamed and cursed as most men do. One of them even found strength to mock, "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other thief rebuked him, "Don't you fear God? We are punished justly, getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then, turning his head toward Jesus with obvious effort, he said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus' response astonished me. "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." What manner of man promises paradise to a dying thief? What king offers royal clemency while hanging from a cross? The crowd that had gathered displayed the usual mix of emotions: morbid curiosity, righteous satisfaction, grief. The priest who had demanded his execution stood watching, arms folded in victory. Among the mourners, I noticed a group of women supporting each other in their grief, and with them a young man who I later learned was John, one of Jesus' closest followers. Near the 6th hour, the most extraordinary thing happened. The sky, which had been painfully bright, began to darken, not with clouds, but with a strange, encroaching shadow that seemed to swallow the sun itself. An unnatural silence fell over Golgotha. The jeering stopped. The casual conversations among my men died away. Even the moans of the crucified grew quiet. For 3 hours, this darkness persisted. I had fought in many lands, witnessed eclipses and storms, but never had I felt such a weight in the air, as if the world itself were holding its breath. During these dark hours, Jesus spoke several times. Once to his mother and the disciple standing with her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." Even in his agony, he made provision for those he loved. Then, as the 9th hour approached, he cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some in the crowd misunderstood, thinking he was calling for Elijah. One man ran to fill a sponge with wine vinegar, lifted it on a staff to Jesus' lips. He turned his head away, refusing the small mercy of dulled senses. The darkness seemed to press down upon us like a physical weight. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with an inexplicable anticipation. Something was happening beyond what my eyes could see or my mind comprehend. Then Jesus called out in a voice surprisingly strong for one who had hung crucified for 6 hours, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." With these words, he bowed his head and breathed his last. At that precise moment, The earth beneath my feet began to tremble, not a gentle quake, but violent shaking that threw men to the ground and split rocks asunder. In the city below, I would later learn, the heavy curtain in the temple tore in two from top to bottom as if rent by invisible hands. As the earthquake subsided, I found myself on my knees, staring up at the lifeless form on the cross. The darkness was lifting, but a greater darkness seemed to have entered my soul. Not of despair, but of overwhelming realization. The words came unbidden to my lips. Surely this man was the Son of God. My soldiers looked at me with alarm. For a Roman officer to proclaim the divinity of an executed Jewish criminal was unthinkable. Yet I couldn't take back the words, nor did I want to. In that moment, something fundamental had shifted within me. Later, as evening approached, orders came to ensure the condemned were dead before the Sabbath began. My men broke the legs of the two thieves, hastening their suffocation, standard procedure for crucifixion. But when they came to Jesus, he was clearly already dead. To confirm it, and to fulfill my duty as the officer in charge, I took my spear and thrust it into his side. Water and blood flowed out, splashing down the shaft and onto my face. A drop touched my eye, my painful, failing eye, and in an instant the constant ache vanished. My vision, which had been growing increasingly dim, suddenly cleared with startling sharpness. I could see individual olive leaves on distant trees, the expressions on faces far down the hill. But the true miracle wasn't my restored sight. It was what I now saw clearly in my heart. Everything I had believed about power, about justice, about what made a man worthy of respect, had been upended in a single day by a man who conquered through surrender and ruled through sacrifice. The inner transformation. Sleep eluded me that night. While Jerusalem observed Passover, I sat alone in my quarters, turning my spear over and over in my hands. The dried blood on its tip, his blood, seemed to glow in the lamplight. I couldn't bring myself to clean it off. My mind replayed every moment of the crucifixion, the way he had forgiven those who tortured him, the compassion he showed the thief, the strength in his final cry. No ordinary man died like that. No ordinary death transformed the heavens and shook the earth. And my eyes, my perfectly clear eyes, were proof that something miraculous had occurred. The military physician who had been treating my condition for years could offer no explanation for my sudden healing. "Perhaps the gods favor you, centurion," he had said, bewildered after examining me. "Not your gods," I had replied, earning a concerned look. Marcus, my second in command and oldest friend, entered without knocking. He had been with me in countless battles, had saved my life twice. If anyone would understand, it would be him. "The men are talking, Longinus," he said without preamble. "About what you said at the execution." I nodded, unsurprised. "Let them talk. This isn't a small matter. You called the Nazarene the Son of God in front of witnesses, because that's what he was." I met Marcus's gaze steadily. I saw it. I felt it. Marcus lowered his voice. "Have you lost your mind? You're a Roman officer. Your oath is to the emperor, the only divine Son we acknowledge." "I know what my oath was," I replied, noting my own use of past tense. "Was?" Marcus caught it too. His face hardened. "Think carefully, old friend. 23 years of service, honors, respect. You would throw it all away for a dead Jewish criminal?" "He won't remain dead," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Marcus stared at me as if I had grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" "He said he would rise again after 3 days. His followers believe it, and now so do I." "Listen to yourself," Marcus hissed. This is sedition. This is madness. My eyes were failing, Marcus. You know this. Now I see perfectly. His blood touched them, and they were healed. Coincidence. Or your mind playing tricks. No tricks. I stood, facing him. I've served Rome faithfully. I've killed without question. I've crucified men whose only crime was defying the empire. But yesterday, for the first time in my life, I witnessed true power. Not the power of swords and armies, but something greater. Marcus's hand moved to his sword hilt, a subtle gesture, but one I noticed immediately. We had been brothers in arms for decades, but in this moment a chasm opened between us. "Don't report me," I said quietly. "Let me resign my commission. I'll leave Jerusalem." "And go where?" "Join his scattered followers." "Become a Jewish convert?" Marcus's voice dripped with disgust. "I don't know yet. I only know I can't continue as I was." Marcus studied me for a long moment. "The garrison commander wants a report about your outburst. I've delayed it. Told him you were overwrought from the earthquake, that you didn't mean it." "I meant every word." He sighed heavily. 3 days, you say. If this Nazarene remains dead, as all crucified men do, will you come to your senses?" I considered this. If he remains dead, then I was wrong about everything. Then I'll wait 3 days before filing my report, for our friendship's sake. After Marcus left, I paced my quarters until dawn. The conflict within me was more intense than any battle I'd fought. If I embraced what I now believed, I would lose everything: my position, my honor in Roman eyes, perhaps even my life. If I denied it, I would lose something I hadn't known I possessed until yesterday: my soul. On the second day, rumors began circulating through Jerusalem. The Nazarene's tomb was being guarded by soldiers. His disciples might try to steal the body, the priests worried, to falsely claim resurrection. I found myself walking near the garden tomb, observing from a distance. The guards were alert, professional. No one would get past them. Part of me, the rational Roman part, agreed with the precaution. Dead men don't rise. Yet another part of me, the part awakened on Golgotha, waited with inexplicable hope. That night, I dreamed again of the barren hill. But this time, instead of darkness and storm, the hill was bathed in light. A figure stood there, arms outstretched, not in suffering, but in welcome. I approached, fell to my knees. Gentle hands raised me up. "You saw," the figure said. "Now go and tell what you have seen." I woke with tears on my face and absolute certainty in my heart. The third day dawned. I prepared my armor out of habit, then stopped midway. Instead, I removed the amulet of Mars I had worn since joining the Legion. In its place, I put the smallest fragment of wood I had taken from the cross. His cross. Before the sun had fully risen, the city erupted in chaos. Soldiers from the tomb guard ran through the streets, their faces pale with terror. I intercepted one I knew. "What happened?" I demanded. "The tomb," he gasped. "It's empty. We saw light, brighter than the sun. The stone rolled away by itself." Other reports followed throughout the day. Women claiming to have seen him alive, disciples encountering him on the road to Emmaus. Each account strengthened my resolve. That evening, Marcus returned. One look at my face told him everything. "So you've heard the rumors," he said flatly. "Not rumors, truth." "Longinus, I've made my decision, Marcus. I'm leaving the Legion." His face darkened with anger, then softened to something like pity. "You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is how long it took me to see the truth." He shook his head. "The commander won't accept your resignation. He'll have you arrested for dereliction, possibly worse if he learns why." "Then I'll leave tonight. Tell them what you will." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. We fought together in Germania, in Syria. I thought I knew you. I thought I knew myself, I replied. I was wrong. After a pause, he reached out and grasped my forearm in the soldier's farewell. May your God protect you. You'll need it. That night I removed my armor for the last time. The weight lifting from my shoulders felt like more than just metal. It was the burden of all I had done in Rome's name. I took only my spear, still marked with his blood, a small bag of coins, and the clothes on my back. As I slipped out of Jerusalem under cover of darkness, I knew I was leaving behind not just a career, but an identity. Who was Longinus without his centurion's crest? I was about to find out. A new life and martyrdom. Finding the disciples proved more difficult than I had imagined. They remained in hiding, fearful of the same authorities who had crucified their master. Who could blame them for their caution? A Roman centurion seeking their whereabouts would naturally be viewed with suspicion. For weeks I moved through Jerusalem in common clothes, listening to whispers and rumors. My military bearing was difficult to disguise. 2 decades of command had shaped my posture, my walk, my very presence. But my healed eyes saw the world differently now. Where once I had observed citizens for signs of rebellion, I now looked for glimmers of the same light I had witnessed on Golgotha. It was in the market that I finally found a connection. A merchant, seeing me examine a fish symbol scratched discreetly on a stall post, approached cautiously. "You seek something more than figs, stranger?" "I seek those who followed the Nazarene," I replied softly. His eyes widened. "Many sought him in life. Fewer acknowledge him in death." "He is not dead," I said with quiet certainty. The merchant studied me intently before nodding almost imperceptibly. "Return at sunset. My nephew will guide you." That evening I was led through winding alleys to a humble home where a small group had gathered. As I ducked through the low doorway, conversation ceased. Hostile eyes turned toward me. "This is the man I mentioned," my guide said. "He seeks the way." A bearded man stepped forward. I recognized him immediately. John, the disciple who had stood at the foot of the cross. "I know you," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "You commanded the execution squad." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "I did." Murmurs of alarm spread through the room. Several men moved protectively toward the women present. "I am unarmed," I said, spreading my hands. "I come seeking understanding." "Understanding of what?" John asked. "Of him, of what happened on the cross. Of why my life has been turned upside down since that day." John's gaze intensified. "What do you mean?" I told them everything. My growing unease during the trial, the darkness and earthquake, my inexplicable proclamation of Jesus as God's Son, the healing of my eyes when his blood touched them, and my certainty that he had risen. As I spoke, the hostility in the room gradually transformed into astonishment. "You were the centurion?" a woman asked. I recognized her as one who had wept at the cross. The one who said, "Truly this was the Son of God?" "I was. I am." John approached me slowly. "The prophecy said, 'They will look on him whom they pierced.' You pierced his side with your spear, yet now you seek him." "I do not expect your forgiveness," I said, "but I must understand what happened to me on that hill." To my surprise, John placed his hand on my shoulder. "If he has called you, who are we to turn you away? He forgave those who crucified him. Can we do less?" In the months that followed, I learned from those who had walked with Jesus, heard his teachings from those who had received them firsthand. The carpenter from Nazareth was unlike any religious leader I had encountered in all my travels. His message simple, yet profound. His love extending even to enemies. His power demonstrated not through domination, but through healing and restoration. Thomas, the disciple who had doubted the resurrection until touching Jesus' wounds, became an unexpected friend. Perhaps he saw in me a kindred spirit, another who had needed physical proof before believing. "I still don't understand sometimes," Thomas confessed one evening as we shared a simple meal. "Why would God choose to reveal himself this way? Through suffering? Through death?" "As a soldier," I replied, "I was taught that strength meant inflicting suffering, not enduring it. Now I see that his way of victory turns everything upside down." The persecution in Jerusalem intensified. Stephen, a man full of faith and wisdom, was stoned to death while I watched helplessly from the crowd, my heart breaking as history repeated itself. The disciples scattered, and I traveled with several to Antioch, where followers of Jesus were first called Christians. My past as a Roman officer became both a liability and an unexpected asset. I understood military tactics, could anticipate moves against the growing community of believers, and knew when to advise caution or relocation. My knowledge of multiple languages helped spread the message to diverse populations. Years passed. I journeyed through Asia Minor, eventually settling in Cappadocia. There, I established a small community of believers, using my military discipline to organize support for widows and orphans, education for children, and care for the sick. My spear, once an instrument of death, I refashioned into a staff that supported me as I traveled the rugged terrain, bringing the message of Christ to remote villages. Word of my past spread, of course. "The centurion who pierced Christ now preaches Christ," people would whisper as I entered a town. Some were skeptical, others inspired by the dramatic transformation. I was blind, both in my eyes and my heart, I would tell them. But his blood healed my sight, and his resurrection opened my understanding. The empire I had once served so faithfully eventually turned its attention to our growing movement. Emperor Nero blamed Christians for the fire that devastated Rome, unleashing waves of persecution that spread throughout the provinces. Former comrades now hunted those they once protected. In my 16th year as a follower of the Way, as we sometimes called it, Roman soldiers arrived in our village. Their commander, a young tribune, presented the edict: sacrifice to the emperor or face execution. I stood before him, my back straight despite my years. "I once wore the same uniform you wear," I told him. "I served Rome faithfully for decades." "Then you understand duty and loyalty," he replied. "Renounce this Christian superstition. Return to the old gods. Your age and former service will earn you mercy." I smiled sadly. "I have found a greater loyalty, young man, a higher duty." They took me outside the village to a small hill reminiscent of Golgotha. The symmetry was not lost on me. As they prepared for my execution, I felt not fear, but a profound peace. My journey had come full circle. The tribune offered one last chance. "Simply burn a pinch of incense to the divine emperor, that's all. You can worship your Christ privately afterward." "I cannot," I said. "I have seen the true Son of God die and rise again. I pierced his side with my spear, and his blood healed me. I cannot deny him now." "Then you leave us no choice." As they positioned me for beheading, I looked up at the sky, bright blue and clear. "Father," I prayed, echoing the words I had heard on Golgotha, "into your hands I commit my spirit." The tribune gave the signal. I closed my eyes, the eyes that Christ had healed. The last thought that passed through my mind was one of wonder, that I, Longinus, once the executioner, would die as he died, faithful to the end, completing a transformation that began with a single drop of blood on a dark afternoon at Golgotha. Legacy and meaning. The story of Longinus did not end with his martyrdom. In death, as in life, his transformation continued to echo through history, touching countless lives across centuries. After his execution, the Christians of Cappadocia recovered his body, burying him with honor in a simple tomb outside the village. They marked it with the sign of the cross and a spear, symbols of the two defining moments of his life. Within months, pilgrims began arriving, drawn by accounts of the Roman officer who had pierced Christ's side only to become his devoted follower. Reports of miracles at his tomb soon followed. A blind child regained sight after her mother pressed soil from the grave to her eyes. A Roman soldier, secretly sympathetic to the Christians, was healed of battle wounds after praying at the site. Whether these accounts were literal truths or expressions of the profound impact of Longinus's testimony, they speak to the power of his witness. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire and beyond, Longinus became venerated as Saint Longinus in both Eastern and Western traditions. Churches bearing his name arose in Jerusalem, Constantinople, and Rome itself, the very heart of the empire he had once served and ultimately defied. His spear, the Holy Lance, became one of Christianity's most revered relics, believed by many to possess miraculous powers. Emperors and kings would later claim possession of this artifact, seeking the divine authority it supposedly conferred. Yet, beyond relics and miracles lies the true significance of Longinus's journey. His transformation embodies the central promise of Christianity, that no one is beyond redemption, that even those complicit in the greatest injustice can be forgiven and renewed. The centurion's story bridges worlds that seemed irreconcilable: Roman and Jewish, military and spiritual, executioner and disciple. In a world increasingly divided, where identities harden into opposition, Longinus reminds us that the most profound changes often begin with a moment of recognition across seemingly unbridgeable divides. His journey from darkness to light parallels our own struggles with blindness, not just physical but spiritual and moral. How many of us enforce systems we don't question? How many execute orders without considering their justice? How many pierce others with words and actions, unaware of the divine presence we wound? The blood and water that flowed from Christ's side, that healed Longinus's eyes, continues to flow today, offering the same healing, the same transformation to all who recognize their need for it. Perhaps you stand where Longinus once stood, secure in position, certain in worldview, successful by society's standards, yet haunted by dreams you cannot explain, and questions that find no answers in familiar philosophies. Perhaps you sense, as he did, that there is more to power than force, more to victory than conquest, more to life than survival. If so, consider the invitation implicit in his story: to look upon the one who was pierced, to allow your certainty to be shaken, your blindness healed, your life transformed by an encounter with love stronger than death. For in the end, the story of Longinus is not merely historical drama or religious tradition. It is a mirror in which we might glimpse our own potential journey, from instrument of an earthly kingdom to citizen of one eternal, from enforcer of power to ambassador of love, from one who wounds to one who heals. The choice that faced the centurion at Golgotha faces each of us today. Will we recognize the moment when divine love intersects our ordinary lives? Will we have the courage to follow where that recognition leads, even when it costs us everything we thought we valued? The question echoes across 2,000 years, as relevant now as it was when a Roman soldier looked up at a cross and, against all his training and tradition, spoke a truth that would transform his life and reverberate through history. Truly, this man was the Son of God. In the remarkable journey of Longinus, we discover a profound truth that resonates deeply with our own midlife crossroads. Like him, many of us reach a point where the certainties we've built our lives upon begin to crumble. The career paths we've followed diligently, the identities we've crafted carefully, the world views we've defended staunchly, all can be transformed by a single moment of genuine revelation. At 40, 50, or beyond, we may find ourselves questioning the very foundations of our existence. The recognition can be jarring, even frightening. Who are we if not the roles we've played? What remains when our carefully constructed certainties fall away? Longinus faced this existential challenge when everything he believed about power, justice, and purpose was upended on Golgotha. His story reminds us that it's never too late for transformation. The centurion, who had spent decades enforcing Roman rule, found the courage to embrace a radically different path, not in the idealism of youth, but in the seasoned wisdom of middle age. His physical healing mirrored a deeper spiritual awakening that changed not only his perception, but his very identity. Today we may not witness physical miracles, but we still encounter moments of grace that invite us to see differently. Perhaps it comes through an unexpected relationship, a health crisis that reorders our priorities, or a quiet epiphany during life's ordinary moments. Whatever form it takes, the invitation remains the same, to recognize truth when it stands before us, even when acknowledging it costs us dearly. Longinus teaches us that our greatest strength may lie not in clinging to what we know, but in the courage to follow truth wherever it leads, and that our most meaningful legacy might begin precisely when we're brave enough to set down the spear and open our hearts to healing. Did Longinus's journey of transformation touch your heart today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this story resonated with your own life experiences. If you found meaning in this reflection on faith, redemption, and second chances, please consider liking this video to help others discover it too. Don't forget to share with friends or family members who might need this message of hope in their own lives. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of faith that bridge ancient wisdom with modern understanding. Each week we explore forgotten figures whose lives illuminate timeless truths. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery. Until next time, may you find the courage to embrace your own path of transformation.